Hello, I'm Angeline Ong, and welcome to Beat the Street, the show that gives you all the tradable news and data that you need to know ahead of the Wall Street Open. First up, CPI caution out there as investors brace for that key inflation report, plus a packaging giant in the making. Smurfit Kappa and WestRock merge. We'll get the details for you and what this means for the packaging industry globally. And of course, we're waiting on Apple's Wanderlust event. This is the launch event when Apple will showcase its latest offerings and also potentially a rebranding. Jeremy Naylor will be with us for more on that in just a moment. First up, good afternoon. A very warm welcome to you for those of you joining the other side of the pond. This is, of course, a new edition of Beat the Street, and now not long before Wall Street starts trading, let's have a look at the charts for you and what kind of mood music we're seeing and hearing ahead of the open. It's pretty cautious, I have to say, ahead of that Wednesday inflation number. Stocks also slipped in the previous session ahead of that Apple iPhone event. 10-year bond auction in focus as well. Just showing you the Tech 100 too. And if you're looking at a longer term picture, just want to give you a weekly view, because as you can see there, that rally that we saw in the first half of the year, it is stuttering somewhat, and we are starting to see this index and the others too pretty much in a range bound situation. For the US Tech 100, we are seeing a band between 10,800 and around 15,600 there. A lot of this will depend on what happens with that inflation figure and what this then means for US interest rates. There is this growing school of thought out there that perhaps rates might have to be higher for longer. The CPI reading, of course, will give us and shed more light on that. It's not just all about the dollar and US inflation. We've also got other central banks in focus. The Japanese one is one of them. Yen slipping after its biggest daily rise since mid-July. This was in the previous session as comments from Japan's top central banker on a possible end to its negative interest rate policy reverberated throughout the markets. Just showing you Adam Cole from RBC Capital Markets, well, his comments there on Japan. He says that Japan is still a long way from meeting the criterion of sustainable 2% inflation. And the comments from the BOJ governor don't really change much for him. Just a recap for those of you who haven't been following, Kazuo Ueda told a newspaper over the weekend that the bank could get enough data by the end of the year to determine whether or not it can end its negative rates. Now, the pound also in focus after employment numbers from the UK. Dollar, as I mentioned earlier, of course, in focus ahead of those inflation numbers. IG's chief market analyst, Chris Beecham, has been looking at the levels for those two for you.
The pound has come under pressure against the dollar this morning following the UK unemployment and wage data. Despite the strong rise in UK pay packets for the 3 months to the month of July, which might indicate that the Bank of England needed to keep raising rates, the signs of weakness in the headline unemployment rate suggests that we are now seeing the UK economy beginning to stumble. I think this is going to be the major problem for the Bank of England heading into the rest of the year. While inflation is still running above target, the UK economy is beginning to show those signs of strain, which might lead them to pause their hiking campaign. We can expect it to be a fairly tough decision for the Bank of England at its next meeting later this month, and probably even tougher later in the year.
Now, not just inflation that is keeping investors on tenterhooks. We have got some M&A action as well, particularly in the packaging industry. Just showing you Smurfit Kappa shares because they are falling. This is a day view, but let's give you an hourly view there. There you have it, that down arrow red bar, along with these moves here. Just to catch you up, Smurfit Kappa and WestRock have agreed to create the world's biggest packaging firm. WestRock stockholders Here are the details. We'll get one rather new Smurfit Westrock share. That is the new name of the company. $5 in cash for each share that they hold. And what's also interesting is that it's more the response, or rather the reaction to this news. Although the deal value offers more than 36% premium to the closing price of Westrock on September 6th. Let's give you the daily chart there. However, it doesn't seem to have been welcomed by investors, especially on the Smurfit Kappa side. Analysts at JP Morgan and also Jefferies have said that they believe that the premium being paid to Westrock was higher than most Smurfit investors were hoping for. And Smurfit Kappas are down, as you can see there. Let's just check on how much they're down by at the moment, down 8.8% in Dublin. Also, Oracle, another one that we are watching for you, because Oracle, we're seeing a reaction on the all-session chart there, as you can see. The cloud services provider looking and hurting there, down and ahead of the main open, but Oracle is an all-session stock on the IG platform, down 9.04% the previous session, and currently up around a third. So it is staging a bit of a recovery there. Oracle, of course, in the previous session, they forecast current quarter sales below targets and narrowly missed first quarter expectations. Also keeping an eye on Tesla and AI news for you. AI has been making headlines almost every day around the world, especially in the US session. This is Tesla's stock. They're also another all-session stock. Its shares were boosted when there was optimism around AI intelligence after a Morgan Stanley rating upgrade. Now, just to give you a recap, Tesla before the bell on Tuesday and other mega cap growth names, including Amazon, Microsoft, are all falling slightly. But in the previous session, they did see a climb all up, as I can see, showing you the Oracle shares there, Microsoft, and also Amazon climbing some 3.5% in the previous session on AI hopes as well. Meta as well, another one that we're looking to in the open, because they said that it was working on a new and more powerful AI system. Now, just recapping Apple, because that's the big set piece that could move its shares and many others in the coming session. Of course, we're waiting on Apple's Wonderlust event later today. IGTV's Jeremy Naylor has been watching this closely. Jerry, what can investors expect to hear?
Well, look, I better start by laying my stall out. I have to confess, I'm not an Apple user, and I've always viewed these events as clever marketing tools to continue to reel in those early adopters of new Apple technology. And look, I understand why people like this. It is a very cool bit of technology to own, but I'm always a little bit confounded as to why there's a need to continue to update perfectly good equipment that one may have. But I accept that Apple continues to lead the way in new developments. And while today's event may not have the thunder of past presentations, I can't help but feel some of today's events have been a little bit out of Apple's control. In fact, one particular reveal today is expected to be the inclusion of the ubiquitous USB-C charging point, foisted on Apple by EU government insistence. To me, it seems a logical step to enable people to use a standard. But that's not what Apple is all about. It's all about leading the pack. So today's new Apple iPhone 15 will almost certainly have a USB-C charging cable point, certainly for the European market. But will there be any rabbits produced from up the sleeve to make this event unique for all the right reasons? Well, there may well be, but we'll have to stand by to see what's revealed from Cupertino later on today. Apple certainly has to do something to combat the slowdown in smartphone sales. The highly anticipated virtual reality headset, which may yet be part of future iPhones, won't go on sale until next year. And oh boy, is that going to cost a packet of money. But a big headwind Apple has to contend with is the news last week that China reportedly banned the iPhone from state-run buildings on security grounds. It's got to overcome that. How it does that remains to be seen. But clearly politically motivated event, but it's taken a little of the wind out of Apple's stock sales. Just before we go to the chart, just want to quickly round up a couple of other things. Apple Watch Series 9, watch out for that. There's a chance as well as some new AirPods as well. And don't forget the Mac, very much kicked into the shadows by Apple iPhones, but that too is possibly going to receive a little bit of updating. And Angeline, you mentioned as well the new branding. Are we going to get a different colour Apple logo? Well, that seems to be something that people are going to be looking out for as well. Let's bring up the share price chart. On the far right-hand side here, you can see the slide that we've seen recently. This is a $2 billion loss. Now, this is an almost $3 trillion company. So that little move there is a $2 billion rout on the back of news from China that China is going to ban the use of Apple on government premises and with government iPhones. But you've only got to look at the long-term chart here for Apple. Let me just quickly show you what's happening here in the long-term picture for Apple. And you can see it continues to rise and rise again. $1 trillion market cap back on November 2019. $2 trillion January 2021. And it's flirting with this $3 trillion mark again. This is a whopping great big company. It leads the way. I'm looking for some good things, despite the fact I'm an old curmudgeon and I'm stuck in Android. But I love to see these events. I think they're great events to watch out for. What's going to happen to the stock price? It all has to be seen. It's an all-session stock. We'll just have to see how things trade after the closing bell tonight. But I, for one, will be watching the event.
Thank you very much. Not a curmudgeon at all. And as you rightly say, Apple is a really huge stock. Just speaking to several analysts earlier in the week in the city, and they were saying that it's impossible to actually even avoid Apple in one's pension these days because it's almost represented in every one's portfolio. However, it is interesting to see how they are going to push forward with not just their new products, but also amid all this continued tit for tat between China and the US. Now, just checking in on oil, because oil is also moving ahead of that US inflation figure. Brent futures holding above 90 a barrel. The outlook, of course, before we look at the chart, so we got this animation out here for you. The outlook, of course, will be dependent on not just that CPI figure, but also the API data on US crude stocks. Of course, the elevated price of Brent, as you can see here on my chart, partly down to the fact that we saw Saudi Arabia and Russia announcing they would extend voluntary supply cuts of a combined 1.3 million barrels a day until the end of the year. And just looking at the chart here, if you expanded it out, although oil and Brent are still above that 90 a barrel level, it has cooled slightly since the heady climb since around June, if you look at this trend line chart here. So it'll be interesting to see how oil reacts, both WTI and Brent, to that inflation figure out tomorrow. And just before we go, let's have a last look at how the market is looking. As I mentioned earlier, it's looking like a tepid start, but no surprise there, given investors will not want to make big bets ahead of that inflation figure. And that's it for this edition of Beat the Street, the show that follows the trading action, helping you to position yourself ahead of the opening bell. For more trading insight, do follow me on @IGCom and @Angeline Ong on Twitter. This is IGTV.